Blood is the fluid tissue that flows in our blood vessels. It's involved in transporting gases to and from cells and nutrients and waste to and from cells. As a fluid tissue, it has the formed elements, which are the living cells. And then it has plasma, which is the non-living fluid matrix. If we withdraw blood from the circulatory system and centrifuge it, spin it down, we will have the formed elements at the bottom and the plasma on the top. So we withdraw blood from the arm, put it in a tube, spin it down. Here will be the plasma, and all of this will be the formed elements. Blood has several unique characteristics. It is sticky, opaque, and has a metallic taste to it. It is scarlet to dull red in color. Scarlet blood has maximum oxygen content. Dull red blood has lost a lot of its oxygen. It is more viscous than water, so yes, blood is thicker than water, and it has a slightly alkaline pH, a pH of right at 7.4. It accounts for about 8% of our body weight. That's about 5 to 6 liters, and a liter is roughly a quart. Plasma is 90% water. It contains over 100 different substances dissolved in it. These will include your respiratory gases, hormones, plasma proteins, waste, nutrients, just all kinds of things dissolved in the plasma being circulated around your body. After water, the most common component is the plasma proteins. These are made by the liver and they have several functions. Albumin composes a large part of the protein in the blood. This helps contribute to the osmotic pressure. It draws water into the blood so it keeps water in the bloodstream. Also, important proteins include the clotting proteins. These are necessary to stop blood loss. There are three formed elements: the erythrocytes or red blood cells, the leukocytes or white blood cells, and the platelets. The erythrocytes or the red blood cells have a biconcave shape to them. They're depressed in the center. It is their function to transport oxygen. Also, they make the blood thick and sticky. They do not have a nucleus, so they are anucleate, and they contain very few organelles. But they do have hemoglobin in them. Hemoglobin is the iron-bearing protein that can bind to oxygen and somewhat bind to carbon dioxide. But hemoglobin is what transports oxygen in the blood. Because red blood cells do not have a mitochondria, they're not actively metabolic, so they don't use up the oxygen that they're carrying. Red blood cells are the most common of the three formed elements. 4.5 to 5.5 million red blood cells are in a cubic millimeter of blood. Now, a millimeter is that smallest mark on the metric ruler. So imagine a small box that's 1 millimeter on each side. That would be a cubic millimeter. 4.5 to 5.5 million red blood cells fit in that, and there's still room for plasma, white blood cells, and platelets. Here you see a red blood cell. It is circular. Notice there's no nucleus, and it does have this dip in the center. We call it a biconcave disc. Anemia is a condition where there is a decrease in the oxygen carrying capability of the blood. This occurs either because there are fewer red blood cells or because there is a deficient hemoglobin or perhaps an abnormal hemoglobin that cannot carry oxygen. One anemia is sickle cell anemia. Here, the hemoglobin is abnormal. The hemoglobin protein has been changed only by one amino acid, but it changes this hemoglobin's ability to carry oxygen. Because this hemoglobin is abnormal, it doesn't stay in solution and it makes the cells look spiky. They take on a sickle shape. This happens when there is low oxygen in the blood. The red blood cells will then get stuck in small blood vessels and cause infarctions. That is, the blood will not travel any further. This is a genetic disorder, but people who carry this gene are resistant to malaria. The leukocytes are the second of the formed elements. These are the white blood cells, or the WBCs. They make up less than 1% of the total blood volume. They're measured in thousands. About 4,800 to 11,000 white blood cells would fit in that cubic millimeter, along with the 4 to 5 million red blood cells. The white blood cells play a role in your immune defense system. These are the only cells in the blood that are actually complete cells. They have a nucleus, they have organelles, and they are metabolically active. White blood cells have the ability to leave the circulation and move into the tissues. This ability to leave the circulation is called diapedesis. Leukocytosis is a condition where there are an increased number of white blood cells. We see this, for example, whenever there's an infection. The white blood cells increase in number to help fight off the infection. Leukopenia occurs when there is a decreased level of white blood cells. We most commonly see this in people who are undergoing chemotherapy. Leukemia is a cancer of the bone marrow. Here, the white blood cells increase to very large numbers, but the white blood cells are immature. Because they're immature, they do not defend against disease. As a matter of fact, people with leukemia are highly susceptible to infection. There are 5 different leukocytes that are classified into 2 different groups. The granulocytes are cells that have granules in their cytoplasm. One type of granulocyte is the neutrophil. The neutrophil is phagocytic. It increases in number whenever there are acute bacterial infections. Eosinophils also have granules. These stain a bright pink in color. The granules in eosinophils contain antihistamine, so increases in eosinophils are associated with allergies, inflammatory responses, and the granules in eosinophils also have digestive enzymes that will attack parasitic worms. The third of the granulocytes is the basophil. Their granules contain histamine. Histamine is important in initiating an inflammatory response and in calling white blood cells to the area of an injury. The second leukocyte type are the agranulocytes. These cells have no granules in their cytoplasm. Lymphocytes are found not only in the blood but also in lymphatic tissue. They're involved in your specific immune response. Monocytes are the largest of the white blood cells. These are the ones that most readily undergo diapedesis and leave the blood to circulate in the tissue. They are also phagocytic. Because they're large, they're called macrophages. So they're involved in fighting infections by engulfing or eating the foreign cell that's trying to invade. And finally, we have the platelets, the third of the formed elements. These are not whole cells, but little fragments of cells. They come from cells called megakaryocytes that reside in the bone marrow. These little cell fragments contain enzymes that are important in initiating the blood clotting process. So we need these cells so that blood can clot properly whenever a blood vessel ruptures. There are about 250,000 to 400,000 platelets in each cubic millimeter of blood. And here we see a blood film. You see the red blood cells, most numerous. Here are a couple of the white blood cells. These are the neutrophils. And here is a lymphocyte. And then these little tiny blue fragments of cells are the platelets. Hematopoiesis is blood cell formation, and this occurs in the myeloid tissue. This is the red bone marrow. In adults, red bone marrow is found in the bones of the skull, the bones of the pelvis, the ribs, the sternum, and in the proximal epiphyses of the humerus and the femur. In children, most of the bones contain red marrow. All of the formed elements, red cells, white cells, and platelets, arise from the same grandmother cell, the hemocytoblast. This is the stem cell for all of the formed elements. The hemocytoblast forms 2 different cell groups. The lymphoid stem cells, which are the ones that just make the lymphocytes, and then the myeloid stem cells. And the myeloid stem cells is responsible for all of the other formed elements. Hematopoiesis is controlled by the hormone erythropoietin, which is produced by the kidneys. This hormone targets the bone marrow, telling it to make more blood cells, particularly red blood cells. This operates on a negative feedback mechanism. Since red blood cells carry oxygen, this is the mechanism that tells the kidney when to secrete erythropoietin. High levels of oxygen will decrease erythropoietin production. Hemostasis is the process of stopping blood flow in a vessel when it's been broken. We don't want the blood to leak out of our body. It occurs in 3 major steps or phases. We start with the vascular spasm, then there's the formation of a platelet plug, and finally there is blood coagulation or blood clotting. The vascular spasm occurs whenever the blood vessel is injured. The injured lining of the blood vessel will release a molecule that causes the blood vessels to spasm or to constrict down. The spasm will narrow the blood vessels so that decreases the blood flow until a clot can form. The more muscle there is in the blood vessel, the greater the contraction. So arteries can spasm almost completely closed. Unfortunately, this contraction can only last for a short period of time. The second step is the formation of the platelet plug. Normally, platelets are repelled by an intact lining of the blood vessel, the endothelium. But if that endothelium is broken, collagen fibers are exposed, and this causes the platelets to stick to the damaged area. Once the platelets are there, they begin to release chemicals that attract more platelets to the area until the area is completely blocked by a plug of platelets. The platelet plug is only temporary, however. It will not last for very long. That is why we need the third step, coagulation. The injured site releases something called a tissue factor. Now the platelets will interact with this tissue factor to form something called prothrombin activator. Prothrombin activator will convert prothrombin, which is one of the proteins circulating in the blood, to thrombin. And thrombin is an enzyme which will join with fibrinogen and cause fibrinogen to turn into fibrin. Fibrin is an insoluble protein, and as it is formed, it forms a meshwork that begins to trap red blood cells. The fibrin will make the clot, and it will start to retract. The fibrin will shorten as it matures, and this helps pull the edges of the wound closer together and gives us more of a chance for the area to heal. So as we look at the process of hemostasis or blood clotting, we have a break in the blood vessel. This starts the vasoconstriction. We narrow the blood vessel down. We also release chemicals that call platelets to the area, and those platelets call more platelets to the area. So we begin to mend the hole with this platelet plug. But in order to make a more permanent plug, we begin the process of coagulation. There are a number of proteins in the blood that are activated until eventually we produce fibrin. Fibrin fibers make the meshwork that trap all kinds of blood cells, particularly red blood cells, and as the fibrin shortens as it matures, it pulls the edges of the wound together so that we heal up very nicely. We want to make sure that we get clotting only when we want to get clotting. Undesirable clotting occurs when we have a thrombus. This is a clot that forms in an unbroken vessel. It particularly occurs in the legs and as a result can block vessels that don't need to be blocked. If the thrombus breaks free, it becomes an embolus. When a thrombus is floating free in the bloodstream as an embolus, it can lodge in other blood vessels, particularly those in the brain, and cause a stroke, or perhaps those in the lungs and cause a pulmonary embolus. Platelets are normally repelled by an intact endothelium, but the endothelium may be roughened. Either cholesterol may attach the sides of the blood vessel, or there may be tiny tears in the endothelium that don't go all the way through and break the blood vessel. These are areas where platelets can begin to aggregate. Low doses of aspirin will prevent platelets from aggregating, and heparin can be used to clear clotting proteins. These can both be used in immobilized patients where blood may pool. One of the things that keeps blood from clotting is the fact that it's normally racing through your body at a pretty quick rate. Whenever it slows down, this gives platelets an opportunity to start to stick together. Bleeding disorders occur when we have blood that will not clot appropriately. And basically there are two types of bleeding disorders. One is thrombocytopenia. In thrombocytopenia, we do not have enough platelets. As a result, we'll start getting purple blotches under the skin. This is known as purpura. Thrombocytopenia is most commonly seen when the blood-forming tissues, the bone marrow, is suppressed in some way. This can occur whenever we have leukemia, if the patient undergoes radiation, or is on various chemotherapeutic drugs. The other type of bleeding disorder is hemophilia. In hemophilia, some of the clotting factors are missing. These are those factors that circulate in the blood in an inactive form and are only activated to eventually produce fibrin. With hemophilia, there is prolonged bleeding whenever there is a cut. Bleeding in the joints can also disable the joints. We need a certain volume of blood in our body to maintain circulation. Whenever we have large losses of blood, the blood vessels constrict to try to make the area the blood has to fill a little smaller, and we also trigger the bone marrow to increase blood cell formation. If we lose 15 to 30% of our blood, we get very pale and we feel weak. Losses of 30% or more of our blood causes shock. With this loss of blood, there is not enough blood to adequately circulate to all of the tissues. When this happens, we may need a blood transfusion. Blood can be taken from another person. This blood is treated with an anticoagulant so it will not clot and refrigerated. It can last for 35 to 42 days on the refrigerator shelf. We can't give blood to just anybody because there are different blood groups. The red blood cell plasma membranes have genetically determined proteins or markers that are named antigens. Antigens can stimulate your immune system to make antibodies. So if the antigens don't match your antigens, you'll make antibodies, and that will make you destroy the blood that you're given. Agglutination is when the antibodies attach to the antigen and cause the cells to clump. There are two basic blood groups or types we need to worry about. In the ABO group, there are two basic antigens, either A or B. If you have neither of the antigens, you have type O blood. If you have both antigens, you have type A blood. Only one antigen, either A or B, then you have that type of blood. We say that the universal donor is O negative blood. These people have no antigens on the surface of the red blood cells, so they can't possibly irritate anyone's immune system. The universal recipient is AB positive. They have all of the antigens, so anybody's blood will work with them. In the ABO system, antibodies naturally form against the antigens that are not present on the person's blood cells. This occurs within the first 6 months or so of life. The other blood group or type is the Rh. It gets its name because it was first discovered in rhesus monkeys. People who are Rh positive have RBCs that carry the Rh antigen. People who are Rh negative do not carry the antigen. In this case, antibodies are not automatically formed if the Rh antigen is not present. You actually have to be exposed to Rh positive blood if you are Rh negative in order to make the antibodies to the Rh antigen. If you are exposed once, that allows you to make the antigens. The second time you're exposed, those antigens will cause hemolysis of the blood. That is, the red blood cells will rupture. When they do blood typing, they want to cross-match the blood. Cross-matching is simply testing for agglutination in the donor and the recipient. If the antigen is present, the anti-immune serum will cause agglutination. So here we have 2 drops of blood. This has been placed in anti-A serum. This has been placed in anti-B. In other words, this has antibodies to A. This one has antibodies to B. It clumps in both, meaning it has both A antigens and B antigens, so this is type AB blood. Here we only see the clumping in the anti-B. They only have the B antigen, so this is type B blood. Here, only clumping in the anti-A. They only have the A antigen, so this is type A blood. And with no clumping in either antisera, they have no antigen, so this is type O blood. When people are receiving blood, you need to get your same group and type blood. So people who are group A need to get group A blood. They can also receive blood from group O. People who are B need to get blood from people who are either group B or group O. Now these AB people, they're the universal recipient. They can get from anybody. And O can only give to O. Erythroblastosis fetalis is also known as hemolytic disease of the newborn, or HDN. This is something that happens in Rh negative mothers. If the mother is Rh negative when she's pregnant and her mate is Rh positive, there is a chance that the baby will be Rh positive. About 85% of the population worldwide is Rh positive. Now, during the first pregnancy, if the baby is Rh positive, the mother may make Rh positive antibodies if it's exposed to any of the Rh positive blood from the baby during birth. This exposure to blood doesn't always occur, so this doesn't always happen, but there's that opportunity for it to happen. In subsequent pregnancies, those Rh antibodies will cross the placenta to the developing fetus. If the developing fetus is Rh positive, those antibodies attack the fetal blood, causing hemolysis of the blood, hence hemolytic disease of the newborn. This results in anemia in the fetus as it's developing and cyanosis at birth because there is not enough oxygen carrying tissue in the body, and possibly even causes death. Fetal transfusions must be done in order to keep the baby alive. These transfusions are sometimes done intrauterинely. Now, we don't see this disease much anymore because they developed a substance called RhoGAM. RhoGAM will block the production of the antibodies. They used to give RhoGAM immediately after the first birth so that the immune system would not respond should there have been an exposure to Rh positive blood. Now they will give RhoGAM during the pregnancy to prevent the production of the antibodies.